Welcome back to another episode of the Chad and Chong podcast, where we have conversations about performance, production, and everything in between. I'm Chad.
And I'm Chong.
And today we're going to be talking about when preparation meets opportunity.
You have a very nice voice, Chad. That's pretty good.
Thank
bro.
you
That
so
deep
much.
voice sounds great.
I prepared
For this opportunity.
Yeah. See, I rehearsed it in my head. And when the opportunity came,
All right.
sounds like a podcast.
Before we get into this, where'd you get your beanie from?
You know, I got it from my stylist.
Who's your stylist?
She's based out of LA.
Oh, really?
She's an LA based. Yeah, she's born in Hawaii, but
that's nice.
now is an
Yeah,
LA based
yeah,
stylist.
yeah.
So, where'd you get your beanie?
H&M.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
By yourself? Or?
Yeah, by myself. I don't have the luxury of having my own stylist, you know?
Oh, well, when the opportunity comes, you'll be prepared. What about your glasses? Are those real?
These are real. Blue light glasses.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
But are they prescription?
No.
Okay.
I have my prescription ones in the car. When I'm driving and I need to see the exit, I can't see that far. So.
At least you're prepared when you're driving.
Yeah, that's right.
So
For
when
that opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
Well, as you can see, today we actually just winged all that. But we're going to be talking about when preparation meets opportunity. Basically, what this means is this is what you want your life to be. As a musician, as a producer, as an engineer, it's definitely an unpredictable road.
Yeah.
And there's no roadmap. And that's what makes it really tough.
Yeah.
However, there are some things that you can do or that we can do to make sure that we ascend and we move on and we hopefully have a long and lengthy and fun career out of this.
That's good.
And I think one of the most important things is preparation. And with preparation comes habits, and hopefully they're healthy habits. Why don't you talk about how you prepare for like a gig?
Yeah, man. I'll start off by how I when I first started drumming, actually. I'd spend anywhere between 4 to 5 hours in the garage when I used to live in LA and I was growing up. And I remember I had this, I think we talked about it in the first episode, a group percussion drum set. And I'd spend 4 to 5 hours practicing music. And at the time, we had just gotten into church. So my dad was extremely adamant about it only being Christian music. I wasn't allowed to listen to anything else. I remember one time I put a Carlos Santana, the Supernatural album, actually, and I think I was practicing along to Corazón Espinado or Maria Maria, one or the other. And my dad heard the song, and he called me from the window, and he's like, "Yo," he's like, "Come here, come inside the house." So I had to stop the music, whatever, went inside the house. He's like, "What are you playing?" And I was like, "Oh, Dad, it's just some Carlos Santana music, He's like, "Why are you playing that?" And I was like, "Well, Dad, I'm practicing." And he's like, "That's great." He's like, "But you can't do anything besides Christian music." And I was like, "Well, Dad, you have." At that time, he had over 1,000 types of different CDs, like Latin music, like I'm talking about Fania All Stars, El Gran Combo de Puerto Rico, Hector Lavoe, all these amazing salsa artists. And, he was in the process of getting rid of all his music. And I was like, "Dad, those are things that you've treasured for so long, but he was taking his faith extremely seriously, So I remember, man, 4 or 5 hours of rehearsing, and I'd do the same pattern over and over as much as I, could. I'd practice with the click. And I would have these little small exercises my instructor would leave me to practice at home, So 1 week it'd be disco, the next week it'd be, Afro-Brazilian, the following week it would be rock, the next week it would be country, So we touch on a lot of different styles of music, which I think along with building good work habits and having a solid schedule for practicing, it's developing your versatility in music. You want to be able to play all types of different styles of music as best as you can. We obviously are not going to be perfect. We're not going to excel like somebody like Vinny Colaiuta, who, man, that guy is like one of the top drummers in the world, but that guy can play and read anything, But yeah, you want to try to be as versatile as possible, So initially my schedule was very much that, man. I would practice 4 or 5 hours a day. As I got older, responsibility came into hand, so that, kind of limited my time and how much I could practice, and then now also being gone so frequently, that takes away even more time, and I find it interesting, man, because a lot of musicians that I talk to, successful musicians, I'd say, they don't really get a chance to practice. And they always say the same thing. I wish I had more time to practice, but now I got kids. I'm married. Besides music, I work this other full-time job. So not everybody gets the time, to really like work at what they want to do or the things that they want to develop. So that's why it's so important that when you first get into whatever field career you're trying to get into, and specifically because this is a music podcast, if you're doing music, if you have the time, you want to invest as much as you can off the bat. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Chad.
I'm notoriously bad at practicing. And actually, I used to get called out by my piano teacher back when I was like 10 years old because I'd just pretty much sight read, whatever the piece was. And I'd actually be really good at sight reading. And she'd always be like, "That was great, Chad, but I know you didn't practice." I'm like, how did she know? Oh, yeah, I really relied on my ear a lot, which is actually, now that I think about it, I think that was my method of practice and my method of preparing. When I first started drums, I would say that's probably the most that I would practice. I think I was around 13. That was the instrument that I probably practiced the most. But I was always, I didn't like playing by myself.
Yeah.
So whether it was a piano, guitar, drums, and especially bass, which is my primary instrument now, I never practiced bass. Like to this day, I probably took, I had to take a semester of bass lessons when I was in music school in Chicago. And even then, bro, like I honestly didn't practice, and this was college level already. And for me, I like the collective sound as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
So if I'm a bassist, I need to have a drummer with me. I need to have a guitarist, I need to have a keyboardist, and things like that. And so I just like the complete sound. But within that, I think I realized that, again, like my habit was I would just be constantly assessing everything. So whether I'm listening to, a record, a CD back in the days, or if it was live at church or at a concert, I'm just constantly just taking everything in. And even to today, my girlfriend can vouch for me. I watch so many YouTube videos and I'm just constantly analyzing, and I've kind of like make my own assumptions of like, okay, well, since I watched this video of Vinny and he played this song this way, this must mean I must approach it this way.
Gotcha.
So even though I never practiced that, I just kind of assumed, okay, this style fits with this music and this and that. And, and for me, like as a bassist, I'm like, okay, I have to be versatile. And so I listened to just a lot of different basses.
Sure.
And I would get that sound stuck in my head, and I would actually play it in my head over and over and over. And it's funny because I actually just got hit up for a worship night this coming week. And it's very last minute. I won't have time to practice because it's literally like in a day.
Yeah.
And tomorrow I'm super packed, but I'm just downloading all the information.
For sure.
And this is how I always am. And we know a lot of super, super busy touring musicians who go from gig to gig might only have literally a plane ride.
Yeah. I've heard of cases like that too. Yeah.
To go and learn an hour and a half show's worth of material.
Right.
And they just show up. And sound check is their rehearsal, if they even get the full sound check run through.
Right.
But the constant, the mental preparation, I think, is something that, is probably, they're forced to. That's the only way that they can prepare is just mentally. And so even not physically practicing the parts or something like that, but being able to play it in your head is another way of actually being prepared for when an opportunity does come.
Yeah.
Hopefully, because you have it so internalized in your head and in your ears that hopefully it'll just translate into your body when you're playing.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question because I brought this up. This was a couple of years ago now. I wrote this post on Instagram and a story, and I put, something along the lines of CCM music. It wouldn't take you as long to learn a CCM song as it would to learn a gospel song. Let's compare. Like, if we're gonna learn a Hillsong song compared to a Kim Burrell or Fred Hammond song, would you agree that it wouldn't take as long to learn a CCM song if you've been playing for more than 4 or 5 years?
Generally,
Than a Kim Burrell song or a Fred Hammond song. Well, I got a bunch of responses from friends, and all of them were telling me, Kev, as much as I want to agree with you, I don't. They were all telling me CCM still embodies a certain style of playing where, gospel music requires you to play more, but CCM requires you to play less. So you equally have to embody, and you kind of have to train yourself to take out habits, especially for drummers that, where we're doing cadences or drum fills, we base it around eighth notes, 16 notes, sometimes 30-second notes. Gospel music, sometimes if it's a swung song, well, it's triplet based, or more funky, more of like the backbeat, but making sure that the fills that you're doing still keep the 2 and 4 on the snare, things like that. And I remember one guy particularly was like, yeah, I can't agree with you at all. He's like, I don't think, he's like, I think even though CCM music is easier to learn, it's not easier to memorize. But I was like, well, I don't know about that. I mean, what do you think, man? Like, do you think that style particularly is easier to learn than?
Man, I literally was just talking to my girlfriend about this because I also grew up playing a lot of gospel, and I think with gospel, because it's so, maybe it might be more intricate musically, it actually kind of allows for a little more, I don't want to say sloppiness,
Sure,
but you could kind of get by.
Yeah.
If you know the basic beat, if you know the beat from the verse to the chorus and then the bridge, you can kind of get by.
Yeah.
I think with CCM, because it might seem very simple, knowing when to build from fourth, from quarters to eighths to sixteenths, to also understanding your dynamics.
Yeah.
As something as simple as, doing eighths on, say, like a floor and a hat,
right,
moving to a ride.
Exactly. And snare.
Yeah. I think it's actually more difficult to memorize CCM now because of the placement of certain parts.
Sure.
That I feel like more closer to perfection or to the record is what's expectant of it, whereas in gospel you kind of have a little room for interpretation.
Yeah, that's good. 90% of the time when you listen to the intro of the song, it has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the song. As much as I love you guys, man, like, it's just one of those things, like, this intro's so good, but it's so unnecessary to the rest of the song, but it's just anyway, but yeah, gospel music in general, at least today's gospel music, it's about how many notes we can fit in a song. Really for drummers too. They're doing some chops and some stuff that's just like incredible to hear. But it's just sometimes it's like overbearing and it takes away from the groove of the song. Like my buddy Jeff Davis once told me this. He's like we were talking about different drummers. And I think he was bringing up the drummer Steve Jordan. And he says, I don't know if he gave him this title or somebody else did, but he said he was a song drummer, and basically essentially saying you're serving the music. You're not playing anything more, anything less than what you should be playing for that song. If it's a groove that you got to maintain for that song, for that artist, that artist is very simple when it comes to grooves, and not so many fills versus just playing the groove itself, then understanding that and making sure that you honor that request, even though he's not directly telling you to do that, you already know coming in to that rehearsal, this is what he expects of me. So that's why it's very good to study live arrangements of other artists. How was the other drummer before you, or the other musicians, on there? How, what did they play like? What's their sound? And that comes even for drums, for example, to how you tune your drums. You're not going to tune the snare the same way, for gospel music as you would for CCM, You just won't. It's just not going to sound right. It won't sound the same. And you obviously will not use the same cymbals either. Gospel music has a lot of, like, sometimes they implement the 8-inch tom, 8 or 10-inch splashes, quick decay on the cymbals. CCM music has how long can we wash out for? Right. 24-inch rides, sometimes 24-inch kicks. So identifying what fits best for that style of music, I think is equally as important, but yeah, man, I was just remembering that conversation I had, and it was an interesting topic. A lot of friends had a lot of good things to say. I equally agree with you that CCM music, it does take a lot of discipline. Understanding that and playing that style, it obviously requires work.
And everything that you just said there, it still comes back to preparation.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about different drum sizes, cymbal choices, all that. It's you downloading all that information.
Yeah.
To hopefully store in your brain so that when you find yourself, when that opportunity presents itself, and you're like, I need to play a Steve Jordan sounding song.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well, I saw him do this. I heard, Jeffrey Davis say this about him, and I heard this, and you're doing all this analyzing. So hopefully that when that opportunity comes, you're well prepared for it.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
so even though if you've never played it or whatever, all these small details and nuances as to making that sound, that's really what kind of sets you apart from just any other drummer who might say that's just a simple, 2 and 4 backbeat.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not, because when you have to pay attention to tone,
Exactly.
to the feel,
Yeah.
the tempo.
Right.
It's not always on top of the click. At certain parts of the song, he may be a little behind, and then he pushes, and there's so many small things that when you prepare right, and again, it's more than just the notes and actually practicing the song.
Yeah.
More opportunities will find you.
Yeah. Chad, name some ways that you stepped outside of your musical comfort zone.
Man, I'll tell you now that I'm getting older, and with the advent of Instagram and all these things, I honestly feel a certain type of way when I see all these crazy younger musicians who are just killing it.
Yeah.
And even though I have decades of experience touring and studio and all this, I still feel a certain way when I feel like, oh man, I need to sound like that, or I should have been that good 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times I'm kind of in that weird state of, okay, but is that me? Do I need to sound like that, or does it take away from me? And I'm reminded a while back when I first started playing bass, or started really playing out. I played a little bit of gospel, but I didn't really play gospel. I played CCM mostly, but I was brought to, I think I talked about this in the other episodes, but I was brought to this open mic where they're just playing a bunch of Earth, Wind & Fire,
Yeah.
Luther Vandross, Flowetry, and things like that. And because my ear, was really developed at that time, and I could pick up on things really fast, I was able to get by. However, I was definitely uncomfortable at first.
Yeah.
And so, doing that type of gig really pushed me outside of my comfort zone, where I had to go and study. And again, to be honest, I didn't know if I was going to get called for that gig again, but I just didn't want that feeling of being kind of, left out or not fitting in.
Yeah.
So I just studied, and I listened to so much music, in those coming weeks. And, it really pushed me outside of my comfort zone and what I'm used to listening and playing to.
Yeah.
To the point where, I don't think I've ever been in a situation that I haven't been able to kind of hold my own.
Yeah.
Had I not been put in that situation, I don't know if I would have the same type of confidence today.
Got you.
Got you. What about you?
I think that's happened to me a couple times when it's come to directing a band. I'd say that when I my process in learning a song is I pay attention. I start by paying attention to what the drums are doing. Obviously, that's my job, right? I gotta know what the kick pattern is for the verse, for the chorus, for the bridge. Are there any builds? Are there any extra hits or specific arrangements I need to know? So I make sure to study the song as best as I can as a drummer's perspective. And then I embody, okay, well, what is the bassist doing with the drums? Dynamically, what is the guitar doing? What is the keyboards doing? So I always pay attention to those things. And so in the times where I've had to kind of step outside of my comfort zone, it's like, okay, well, I mostly only know what the drum's supposed to do, but I kind of also know what the rest of the band is supposed to be doing. So I hear it in my head, and I'm like, in order for this to sound as full as possible, this has to sound, this bassist has to do this, guitar player has to do that. So kind of delegating, like, hey man, like you're missing this feel, or just simply identifying, okay, this song is not straight, in the sense of like musically, like, you're not playing straight eighth notes, it's swung. So the feel of the bass player, he might be playing it straight. For example, something like, I Wish by Stevie Wonder, the song that I think Stevie plays drums on this track, right? He swings a lot, but I think doesn't the bass stay straight for the most part.
straight, yeah.
It's pretty straight. But it's interesting because now, like, you take drummers like Chris Dave, where he kind of has meshed these two styles of music, man, neo soul and jazz, where he does these crazy arrangements, like these borderline mixtapes he calls them, and where he's keeping a straight groove, but the basses might be swinging, and so it's like, man, how can two styles of music or two styles intertwine so easily? And that's obviously, like, that takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of development, but it takes a great ear, knowing where you are musically and being able to identify that. So I think in the situations where I felt like tested, it's definitely been in those settings where I can be like, okay, it's somewhat delegating what parts each musician should be playing, and feeling confident enough to say, you should be playing this. Not, I think this is what it is. Hold on, give me a sec, let me check. So it's good to always, I think, approach music not just of what your instrument is supposed to be doing, but what the rest of the band is supposed to be doing. It's better to know it all than to not know it at all.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into our next point, which is, striving for excellence. Is a goal that we should always be going for.
Yeah,
And, when we talk about preparation meets opportunity, this is really the way that you advance your career, and hopefully, you get to reach your goals. And one of the things of, again, not having a roadmap in this industry is you never know who's listening. And so, really, I run into musicians where it's like, well, I'll just listen to the songs, on the way there, or I don't need to practice, or I'll just bring, my crappy set of drum set or something, or cymbals, because, it's only a $50 gig, or it's not even paying. It's just for a friend.
Right.
But, how many times have we, or you never know who's listening.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, especially in cases where you don't think that there's going to be something that'll come out of it.
Yeah.
That's usually when something big happens.
Yeah.
And when you're not prepared when that opportunity comes, and you don't put your best foot forward, you kind of miss a huge opportunity there. For example, one of the biggest opportunities that I ever got was from playing at this super, super small church out in Paris. And
Paris, California?
Paris,
okay,
California.
I was about to say Paris, France,
No,
because
I
I'm like,
wish.
man, bro.
No, and it was just this random. I think it was like a midweek or something like that, and I was in college at the time, and I was like, okay, whatever. It's like an hour drive. I go out there, and I bring like one of my crappier basses because I didn't want to bring my nice one, and one of my smaller amps, and I go out there, and I go over there and I play with these musicians. Hey, nice to meet you, whatever. And then one of the guitarists that I played with actually played on a record with Michael Jackson. And this guy's now like 60 plus years old or whatever. And I didn't, to be honest, I did not put my best out there.
Yeah.
Because I barely listened to the songs, and I was like, man, it's just church.
Yeah.
It's just in Paris. And literally, honestly, there was like 13 people in the audience.
Wow.
And I probably got paid like $50, which wasn't even enough for gas. But, I got the guy's number, and it wasn't until after the gig that I that lesson kind of hit me. And I said, wow, I probably should have prepared better, and probably should have brought my better bass so I could have better tone.
Yeah.
And, it just hit me that anywhere that you go, you are essentially marketing yourself.
Right.
And you never know who's listening.
Yeah.
And so striving for excellence is something that we should always be trying to achieve, because again, this is your brand.
Yeah.
You are the brand. We're entrepreneurs.
Right.
Your sound matters. All that kind of stuff. Was there a story like that maybe you didn't quite put your best foot forward?
Yeah, man. I mean, equally the same. I'd compare it to yours, where I took a low paying gig, $50, $75 or whatever. And I showed up, and at the time I would run, I'd always bring these crack cymbals, and I remember I told my friend, it was for this country gig that I was doing at the time. We were doing anywhere between 40 to 50 songs.
Wow.
In a night. We'd play from 9 to 1 out in city of Norco. And I remember Horsetown, USA is literally is what it is. And I remember I would always bring these crack cymbals. And at one point I stacked them, right? And I wanted to compare myself to, Chris Dave also plays with crack cymbals, and he plays with stacks. So if he can do it and he's a professional drummer, well, then I might as well do it. I consider myself to be a professional drummer. I still know the music, but it was like my buddy was like, Kev, like as much as I know that you value and you really look up to Chris, he's like, you're not Chris. So make sure that he's like, bring a good set of cymbals, because the style of the music that you're playing doesn't require a stack. We're playing country music, so a lot of it was like cadences on the snare, 2 and 4 on the backbeat, things like that, and it required big cymbals. And I remember at one point I brought like a 16-inch crash or something like that when I should have been bringing 19-inch, or 18-inch crashes, So I think in those instances I started to take seriously. Okay, you know what? I want to make sure at least I have the proper gear, at least the most up-to-date equipment that I would need for, to be able to excel at this gig. So when we talk about excellence, it's not just about your playing and your preparation, but it also embodies your tools, what you use to execute your job, and that's having a set of in-ears, not bringing a set of AirPods, or what are the old Apple iPhones, or your Delta 3s, that you got on the plane. I call them Delta 3s. I don't know if you do or not, but
No, I didn't know that.
yeah, it's how when you're about to watch a movie, they come through and they're like, anybody need headphones?
But they charge for that now.
No, it's free. I got them free. Yeah, I just took a flight and come on, bro. Yeah. But we call them Delta 3s. Andrew, that's for you, buddy. But yeah, I think in those instances, man, you just want to make sure you're doing the best you can, to make sure you're delivering the best product possible. And more than anybody, man, the music industry is so small. Everybody knows everybody. So it's just a matter of like, okay, well, I want to meet this guy. Well, yeah, my buddy knows that guy. In fact, he's best friends with him. It's like, oh man, how did I not know that? And maybe that guy was there and you didn't do your best job because you decided to learn the music on the go, on the way there, so making sure we do that, I think along with all these things too, man, is when these things are addressed, it's also accepting constructive criticism, as your career has developed, and as you've been doing this for a while now, what are some instances where some people have criticized you, but in a positive way? What are some things you've learned?
Yeah, I to be honest, I used to not be the best at taking criticism, and I think a lot of musicians and creatives, right? Like we're very sensitive.
Yeah.
Because like this is an art form and this is our craft. And so, hopefully whatever we're putting out is, not only an expression of us and how we're feeling, but I mean, hopefully it's also like good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, for me, again, like primarily being a bassist, I've always prided myself in being able to just handle any situation. And whenever I didn't do so well, I'm usually the first critic of myself. And I'm constantly assessing myself. But, after a certain point, you kind of cruise and you do enough of these kind of easy gigs. And it's easy to kind of just tune out any criticism. And especially when, and I'm guilty of this, when I hear it from somebody who may not have as much credits as me, or who, I go, well, who did you play for?
Right.
Have you ever been on tour? And things like that. But, I've come to realize, again, as I've gotten older, I actually really value those people now more than ever, because for them to actually go out of their way and actually say something that could, help me out.
For sure.
They didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
They could have easily, and I know this happens a lot, and it's great. Encouragement is fantastic, but a lot of people are, oh, great job, mom, man, that was awesome, and it's cool to hear that, and it keeps us going. However, this is our profession, and we've chosen this, and this is our job. And the thing is, if we're not in a place to take and receive criticism, we're never gonna get better.
Yeah,
we're never gonna learn to grow. We're never gonna excel in our craft because we think we've made it.
Right.
So having that kind of attitude of, a humble spirit, and also, that you're a student of the game, right? We've heard this, said so many times, is you've never arrived. Like you're never gonna, be there. You're never gonna make it. Because if you did, then it's kind of done.
Yeah.
Like, your whole quest to, to be a musician or whatever, it's kind of done. And so, I think having that attitude, and it does take some maturing too. I'm sure as you're young, and I know there's a lot of I know a lot of friends who are like child prodigies, and they're just constantly in the practice room 16 hours a day, and they themselves again are the hardest critics.
Yeah.
But usually it also stems from maybe their parents.
Exactly. Like requiring excellence,
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but again, like if you're not able to take criticism, I don't think you're going to go far in this industry.
Yeah. It's very difficult. I would agree with you 100%. I think, some of the traits too, I mean, we haven't really talked about it too much, I think, but I would say some of the traits, to keep in mind and I wouldn't even say just for this industry. I'd say in general, we talk. I try to always talk about humility. Amongst your peers. Your character is very important. Punctuality. Preparedness. Some of the things that we're talking and touching on today. All those things embody a professional musician. It's not just one thing that, this guy can play drums. It's like, no, this guy has the whole package. He's a great drummer. He's a good person, has integrity. He's punctual and he's prepared. Those are the things that I think any professional musician would want to have, and not only that, but, with Chad bringing up the point of, we're continuous students of the game of music, so the more that we get to learn from other people that maybe, a style of music that we're not too familiar with, and they might know, and that person might be younger than you. So it's like, okay, well, this person, if I want to know more about Brazilian music, and here's a 19-year-old or 18-year-old that comes, hey man, here's how you play samba, here's how you actually play bossa nova, here's a proper technique. I know for drummers especially, there's an actual Brazilian technique that they implement, man, where it keeps continuous 16 notes that I can't do. I'm like, man, how do and these guys are doing it at 130, 40 BPM, and it's like, that's so fast, but it's this technique that they use when they're playing samba at a really fast tempo. And so, I think embodying these traits, will not only push your career further, but it makes you a better human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to kind of sum this all up, I'm going to quote one of the guys I really looked up to, and a phenomenal bassist, and you actually know him too. Will Burkhead first told me this, a couple years ago. He said, wherever you go, always remember the 5 Ps. And I was like, what? The 5 Ps? And he goes, proper preparation prevents poor performance.
Wow. Not PPP loan, okay? Not for you guys out there.
5.
Yeah, that's 5 of them. That's good. That's good. Thank you for checking out today's episode. Make sure if you haven't already, you subscribe on our YouTube link. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Amazon Music or Spotify or any other streaming platform, make sure you follow, subscribe, so that way you can keep up to date with all the most recent episodes and tune in for next week's episode. Thank you guys.